Elara Monroe froze beneath the grand marble portico, her breath misting in the cool evening air. Behind the towering wrought iron gates, the Carrington Gala pulsed with laughter and clinking champagne flutes, an opulent world that felt galaxies. Away from her life of rented rooms and painstakingly sewn uniforms, she tugged at the hem of her simple dress, every stitch a reminder that she didn't belong. A spotlight of whispered amusement found her the moment she stepped inside. Silk gowns swept past her like tidal waves of wealth, and patrons' glances cut sharper than the crystal chandelier's light. "Is that the seamstress's daughter?" someone murmured. "What's she doing here?" Elara's cheeks flamed. Her pulse thundered. All she'd wanted was 5 minutes alone with Julian Carrington, the man whose kindness had haunted her dreams and whose heart she feared she had shattered. And now, in her belly, she carried more than just regret. She carried his children. As a silk-clad socialite brushed past, haughty laughter following, Elara closed her eyes for a heartbeat, gathering courage she wasn't sure she had. Tonight, she would tell him the truth. Tonight, she would claim her place. Because these heirs deserved to know their father's name. Elara's heart hammered in her chest as she stepped deeper into the grand ballroom. Glistening chandeliers, spilled golden light across marble floors, and the soft murmur of wealth and influence slithered through the air like silk. She clutched the envelope in her trembling hand, the one that held the letter she had written to Julian Carrington. Her palms felt slick. Each breath felt borrowed. Every step threatened to betray her. From across the room, a low ripple of laughter caught her ear. She turned and saw Selene Hawthorne, Julian's polished fiancé, leaning against a marble column in a gown, the color of a stormy sea. Celine's smile was frosty, her gaze sharp enough to slice through Elara's bravado. At her elbow, Vanessa Turner, the chairwoman's daughter, feigned interest in a flute of champagne, but watched Elara with hungry curiosity. "Darling, is that the seamstress's little secret?" Selena's voice rang out, sweet but laced with venom. The room stilled. A dozen pairs of eyes pivoted toward Elara. Socialites paused between sips and gossip, their attention a spotlight of ridicule. Elara's cheeks flamed. Her throat constricted around words she had rehearsed 1,000 times. Just walk past them. Keep going. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not until she'd seen Julian's face. Selene approached, skirt rustling like a serpent unfurling. "I wondered who that shadow at the gate belonged to," she whispered, loud enough for Elara to hear. "I hope you're not here to steal his attention." A laugh tumbled from her lips, crystal clear and cruel. A pang of self-doubt cut through Elara's determination. "You don't belong here. Who do you think you are?" She pictured her cramped apartment, the hum of her sewing machine at dawn, the endless piles of fabric that paid her rent. She had no title, no debutante lineage, no diamonds on her hand. Only this swell of life inside her that she feared would drown her in humiliation before she ever reached Julian. Summoning every scrap of courage, Elara raised her chin. "I'm here to see Julian Carrington," she said, voice quivering but resolute. "I have something he deserves to know." Celine's eyebrows arched. How bold, for a lower-class girl. She gestured to the onlookers, and whispers rippled like waves. "You must think very highly of yourself." Elara's pulse snarled. "I don't belong. I'm nobody." But beneath that fear, a stubborn ember glowed. My children deserve more than shame. She remembered the first flutter of life she'd felt months ago. 2 tiny heartbeats that had changed everything. She straightened, pressing her hand to her stomach. She'd come this far. She wouldn't turn back now. As Celine's amusement threatened to spill into open mockery, a firm voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." Julian Carrington stood at the edge of the dais, every inch the picture of composed authority. His tailored tuxedo fit him like a second skin, the soft light catching in his chestnut hair. His eyes, those eyes, flew from Celine to Elara and lingered on Elara's hand resting on her belly. "Elara?" His voice was low, incredulous. The room stilled again, as though all the world held its breath. "What are you doing here?" Her stomach twisted. He remembers my name. And there it was, the cruel irony. The man she had shared the most intimate night of her life with, when she'd felt hope, now looked at her with shock and confusion, surrounded by a court of judgmental onlookers. I needed to speak with you," she stammered, voice cracking. There's something you need to know." She slid the letter from her coat pocket, fingers trembling so fiercely the envelope bent. "I wrote this for you." A murmur passed through the assembled crowd. Socialites leaned in. Gossip-hungry eyes flicked between them. Celine stepped forward, eyes narrowed. "Julian, darling, is this your stunt to embarrass me?" she purred. Julian's jaw tightened. He looked at Celine, then back at Elara, the conflict clear in his gaze. "Not a stunt," he said quietly. "Elara, explain." Elara's heart thundered so loudly she was sure he could hear it. Every memory of self-doubt crashed in. "You'll ruin everything. You'll lose any chance you had." But then she felt the weight of 2 lives stirring inside her. "They're counting on you." Swallowing hard, she took a breath and let the world blur around her. "I'm pregnant," she said, voice steadier now. "With your child. With your children." She touched her stomach gently, as though cradling, the secret she'd carried alone for months. Shock registered on Julian's face, followed by confusion, then something unreadable. Anguish, perhaps? The guests gasped. Some covered their mouths, others exchanged shocked glances. Celine's façade cracked. Her lips parted in disbelief. "How?" Julian began, voice hushed. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Elara's throat tightened. "I was afraid. Afraid you'd reject me. Afraid you'd—" Her voice broke, tears pricking her eyes. "Afraid you'd hate me." Julian stepped closer, brows drawn together. His gaze flicked from her trembling, form to Celine, whose expression had curdled from shock to fury. "Why didn't you come to me?" he repeated. "Why let this wait until tonight?" She lifted the letter. "I needed to be sure. I needed you to hear it from me first." Her fingers brushed the engraved crest on the envelope, the Carrington seal she'd studied by moonlight, tracing each filigree line until her vision blurred. Now those lines mocked her, symbols of a world that might never accept her. A hush settled. Julian took the letter, his hand brushing hers, and in that moment Elara saw something flicker in his eyes. Conflict, heartache, a rage that threatened to break free. Celine's lips curled into a sneer. "You're unbelievable," Celine spat. "How could you betray me like this? You disgusting—" Julian's hand shot out, cutting Celine off. "Enough!" his voice thundered. The room jumped, as though jolted by an unseen current. Celine recoiled, white-knuckled around her champagne flute. Elara's vision blurred with tears, but she stayed rooted to the spot. Now they'll see. Because this wasn't just her confession. It was a confrontation, with judgment, with shame, with every sneer she'd endured. Julian unfolded the letter with deliberate care. The guests leaned in. The chandeliers glimmered like distant stars. And Elara, trembling but unbowed, waited for her future to unfold, whatever shape it might take. Dawn broke pale and tentative over the Carrington estate, but Elara Monroe stayed in her small rented flat, curled on the edge of her narrow bed. Her fingers brushed the envelope still clutched in her palm, the one Julian had taken from her with such conflicted grace. She remembered the weight of his eyes, sorrow, anger, confusion. And beyond that, something unspoken, a tremor of something, more. He hasn't read it yet, she reminded herself. It's still unwritten in his mind. And yet, the rumors had already begun. Late-night texts from friends. They say the gala was ruined by that seamstress's daughter. Social media, Carrington heir in scandalous romance. Elara felt her pulse spike every time she reached for her phone. Shame and defiance warred in her chest. She would not hide. Her children would not be ashamed of their mother. Taking a steadying breath, she rose and dressed in a simple dress of her own making. Today she had a doctor's appointment, one she had postponed for fear of what she might learn. The weight of 2 tiny lives pressed against her, reminding her of why she could not retreat. Gathering her confidence, she tucked Julian's letter into her coat pocket and stepped into the cool morning air. At the clinic, Nurse Patel greeted Elara with practiced warmth. "Good morning, Ms. Monroe. Ready to see how your little ones are doing?" Elara's stomach tightened with both hope and fear. In the waiting room, she stared at the floral wallpaper, willing her heart to slow. When she finally entered the exam room, the ultrasound machine lay ready like a portal to her future. Dr. Simmons applied the gel and pressed the wand gently against Elara's belly. The screen flickered, then resolved into 2 tiny forms, each flicker a heartbeat of life. Elara's breath caught. Twins, 2 perfect silhouettes, separate but entwined in her womb. Tears pricked her eyes. "They're healthy?" she whispered. Dr. Simmons smiled. "Strong and healthy. 2 little fighters." Elara nodded, pressing her hand to the screen. "Thank you." As they ended the scan, reality crashed back. She would need support, stability, a family name. Her quiet studio apartment would never be enough. Meanwhile, at Carrington Enterprises headquarters, the fallout from the gala rippled through boardrooms and executive lounges. Celine Hawthorne had launched a public relations campaign overnight, statements of betrayal and swift dismissal aimed at distancing herself from scandal. Luxury magazines teemed with sympathetic profiles. Poor Julian, abandoned by his faithless fiancée. But underneath, sharp-eyed columnists questioned why he still hadn't issued a denial. Julian's mother, Beatrice Carrington, summoned him to her study. The mahogany panels bore the weight of generations. Inside, Beatrice sat behind a desk strewn with shareholder reports and climate maps for the family's charity projects. Her silver hair gleamed in the morning light. "Julian," she began, voice smooth but cold, "you must handle this carefully. Our reputation is at stake." He sank into the high-backed chair. "Mother, I know what's at stake, but Elara is carrying my children." Beatrice's eyes snapped. "This woman, she has rights," Julian interjected gently. Beatrice's lips twitched. "I won't have you distracted by sentimentality. You have a fiancé, an empire." Julian stood. "Celine is out of the picture." The words echoed in the quiet room. Beatrice's surprise was swift, then replaced by anger. "You can't be serious." He squared his shoulders. "I am." Beatrice leaned back, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Very well, but we will proceed with caution. I will meet this Ms. Monroe, on my terms." Elara did not expect an invitation from Beatrice Carrington, but an ornate envelope arrived at her studio later that day, embossed with the Carrington crest and stamped with a formal request. "Ms. Monroe is invited to the Carrington estate for a private luncheon to discuss her future." Her heart galloped. This could be her chance to secure her children's name, their future. But fear clawed at her. Beatrice was ruthless, steeped in aristocratic privilege. Could Elara stand firm? She spent the afternoon preparing, mending a small tear in her best dress, pressing it until the fabric lay smooth. She practiced calm breathing, repeating a silent mantra. I belong. I deserve this. The Carrington carriage rolled up the long drive, past blooming rose gardens and the stone lions guarding the entrance. Beatrice received her in the sunlit conservatory, where orchids dripped from glass shelves. Ms. Monroe? Beatrice said, voice polite but distant. Thank you for coming. Elara dipped into a curtsy. Thank you for the invitation, Mrs. Carrington. Beatrice surveyed her like an appraiser. You have courage. I'll grant you that. But you must understand, this family does not welcome scandal. Elara lifted her chin. Nor do I. I came tonight to set the record straight, for my children's sake. Beatrice's gaze softened for a heartbeat. Your children, yes. She paused. But first I need assurances. You cannot legally bind Julian unless you marry him. Elara's heart stumbled. Marry him? I wanted only to tell him. Beatrice's lips curved. If you wish for our support, that is the price. Elara felt the walls closing in, the luxury of the conservatory shrinking, the orchids looming like silent witnesses. Marry him. The idea brought a swirl of emotions, hope tinted with fear, love tangled with doubt. She thought of her twins, 2 innocent lives who deserved security above all else. I will not blackmail him, she said, voice firm. If marriage is the only way to secure their future, then I will consent. But I ask that he do this of his own free will. Beatrice studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. Very well. I will present this to Julian. But know that others in society will judge you fiercely. You must be prepared. Word of the luncheon reached Julian in the late afternoon, as he paced on the terrace overlooking the estate's lake. His reflection in the water looked haggard, haunted by decisions he had never imagined making. He watched the sun dip low, painting the sky in bruised purples and deep oranges. Behind him, his friend and legal advisor Marcus Lane joined him. I heard about the proposal, Marcus began. You're willing to marry her? Julian ran, a hand through his hair. I don't want to hurt her. Not like Celine hurt us both. Marcus sighed. Beatrice won't take no for an answer. It's her way of damage control. But you need to be sure. Elara isn't a business asset. Julian's jaw clenched. She's the mother of my children. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. Then do right by her, and by them. But choose willingly, not under duress. Julian nodded, staring at the horizon. Choose her willingly. The thought sent a warmth through him, tender, exhilarating. Yet doubt lingered. Could he commit his life to a woman he'd barely known? To Elara, whom society scorned? He took a deep breath and headed inside, determined to speak from his heart. That evening, Carrington Enterprises hosted a charity banquet. The grand hall was draped in burgundy velvet, the air rich with the scent of roses and aged whiskey. Elara arrived by quiet invitation, escorted by Marcus to an unassuming seat at a side table. She felt the weight of 100 gazes, some curious, others contemptuous. Across the room, Julian stood behind a lectern preparing to speak. His tailored tuxedo seemed borrowed from another man, confident, unflappable. But Elara saw his fingers tremble when he clutched the notes. He began, Thank you all for your support of our foundation. Tonight, we celebrate not only the progress we've made, but the promise of the next generation. A murmur of polite applause. Elara's throat tightened, her hand rested on her belly. Julian's gaze swept the crowd, then found her. For a moment he lost his place, eyes softening. He set the notes aside. I have an announcement. Gasps fluttered through the hall. Elara's heart jammed against her ribs. Julian cleared his throat. I will soon become a father. Silence. then a ripple of astonished whispers. Elara pressed her hand to her stomach, tears pricking her eyes. Julian continued, voice steady now. And I intend to stand by the mother of my children, for all the world to see. A surge of warmth flooded Elara. He glanced at her, a small tender smile touching his lips. She returned it, her heart swelling. The room exploded in applause. Some hesitant, some enthusiastic, but all unavoidable. Celine Hawthorne sat at the next table, her cheeks pale, resentment flickering in her eyes. Beatrice watched from the dais, inscrutable. For that blessed moment, though, Elara felt neither shame nor fear, only an ember of hope igniting into something fierce. Later, as lanterns glowed in the courtyard, Marcus found Elara beneath a wisteria arbor and offered her a glass of water. You handled that brilliantly, he said. He meant every word. Elara exhaled, her gaze drifting over the gardens glimmering in moonlight. I didn't know I had that strength, she whispered. Marcus smiled. You did, all along, and your twins will know their mother as someone who fought for them. Elara pressed a hand to her belly. 2 lives grew inside her, each heartbeat a testament to her courage. She had faced judgment, isolation, and the polished cruelty of high society, and emerged determined, empowered by love and truth. As she gazed at the moonlit sky, Elara realized that the journey was only beginning. The world she had stepped into was only half forged for her and her children, and there would be storms ahead. But now she carried not only life, but conviction. And with Julian by her side, she would weather any tempest to build a family worthy of their heritage and of her heart. The final board meeting of the quarter convened in Carrington Enterprises' glass-walled conference room, its sweeping views of the city skyline muted by the tension inside. Shareholders in tailored suits murmured among themselves, phones flickering discreetly with news of Elara Monroe's impending marriage to Julian Carrington and her hidden status as the mother of his twins. At the head of the long mahogany table, Beatrice Carrington presided with an imperious gaze. Elara, Beatrice began, voice cool as polished marble, I trust you understand the gravity of this union. You're asking to sit at our table, literally and figuratively. Many here question your pedigree, your capacity to lead. She tapped her manicured nails on the table. I will not tolerate any misstep that might sully our legacy. A ripple of agreement circled the room. Elara sat in the seat reserved for Julian's fiancé, palms flat against the leather armrests. Beside her, Julian glowed with quiet pride and worry in equal measure. His hand brushed hers beneath the table. Elara's heart thundered. They think I'm unworthy. They think my story is scandal, not strength. She took a slow breath, recalling the soft brush of twin heartbeats under her fingertips, the steadfast warmth in Julian's eyes. In that moment, she realized what she must do. She would claim her place, not as a charity case, but as an equal. Beatrice continued. Let us dispense with pleasantries. Our next initiative requires discretion and proven leadership. Can you assure us, Elara, that your background won't become a liability? Her smile, thin and knowing, dared Elara to falter. Elara met Beatrice's gaze. The room fell silent. She felt the weight of dozens of judging eyes, but she centered on one truth. She had fought for this, for her twins, for a future where their mother was more than a footnote. Mrs. Carrington, Elara began, voice steady though her fingers trembled. My background isn't a liability, it's my strength. A murmur rippled around the table. Elara continued, drawing on every ounce of courage. I know what it's like to build from nothing. I understand the value of perseverance, of shaping raw materials into something lasting and beautiful. That's what I bring to this company, and to Julian's life. Her words hung in the air like a challenge. Beatrice's lips curled in disdain, A sentimental answer, she scoffed. Business is not built on sentiment. Julian stood, cutting through the tension like a blade of light. On the contrary, Mother, everything we do, every venture, every investment, ultimately serves people. Elara reminds me of that, and I trust her judgment implicitly. Elara's gaze flicked to Julian, steady, unwavering. He believes in me. She felt her confidence solidify. Turning back to Beatrice, she took a decisive breath. If you doubt my abilities, I welcome the challenge. Assign me the project you believe impossible, and I'll show you that merit, not lineage, defines success. A murmur of surprise circled the room. Beatrice's eyes narrowed, but before she could speak, a voice from the far end, the company's CFO, spoke up. Actually, Ms. Monroe, there is one initiative that's been languishing for months, the Rural Affordable Housing Project. Perhaps you could oversee its relaunch. It needs practical leadership, not just capital. Elara's pulse surged. This is it. She nodded once, firmly. I accept. Silence reigned. Then Beatrice exhaled, a brittle sound. Very well. She tapped a sheet of paper. You'll have all necessary resources, but any failure will reflect poorly on us all. Elara's spine straightened. Then let my success reflect all of us. Julian's face broke into a proud smile as the shareholders erupted into cautious applause. Elara's cheeks warmed, not with embarrassment, but with triumph. She had faced the fiercest critic of her life and stood unbowed. As the meeting adjourned, Elara stepped into the hallway, heart still racing. Julian joined her, sweeping off his jacket. You were incredible, he murmured, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I knew you could do it. Elara leaned into him, tears of relief and pride glinting in her eyes. I did it for our children, she whispered. They deserve a mother who refuses to hide. Behind them, footsteps approached. Beatrice appeared, her posture regal but softened. She paused, studied Elara for a long moment, then nodded once, an acknowledgement of respect. Well done, Ms. Monroe, she said, voice unreadable. I look forward to seeing what you accomplish. With that, she swept past. Elara exhaled, the tension draining away. She slipped her hand into Julian's. I've never felt more sure of anything, she confessed softly. Julian pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Neither have I. Together, we'll build more than an empire. We'll build a family. Under the glow of the corporate suite's chandelier, Elara realized her journey had reached a turning point. She had confronted the harshest judgment and emerged triumphant. Now, with her own voice echoing in boardroom walls and twin heartbeats as her promise, she was ready to embrace every challenge that lay ahead. The weeks following the boardroom showdown unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony. Elara rose each morning to deliver updates on the Affordable Housing Initiative, her impossible project, as some had called it, balancing site visits with strategy sessions, budget reviews, and community outreach. Each milestone she met added another brick to her credibility, both within Carrington Enterprises and in her own heart. On a crisp spring morning, Elara stood at the edge of a half-built community on the outskirts of town. Rows of freshly painted townhomes lined a sweeping lawn, and excited families milled about, imagining their new lives. Children chased each other along the sidewalks. Elders admired the sturdy porches and energy-efficient designs. Elara watched, with a swell of pride, as contractors adjusted shutters and landscapers planted young saplings. Julian approached, slipping his hand into hers. They're beautiful, he murmured, voice soft. Just like you envisioned. Elara studied the smiling faces of future residents, single mothers, retired teachers, veterans, all finding a place to call their own. She thought back to her own journey. The fear in the ballroom, the searing judgment, the silent nights scanning her empty walls. Now, she had helped create homes for dozens. She squeezed Julian's hand. We did this together. The mayor stepped forward, microphone in hand. Ms. Monroe, Mr. Carrington, thank you for delivering on your promise. Today, 120 families move into safe, affordable homes, a legacy you can both be proud of. A round of applause erupted. Elara's cheeks warmed. She allowed herself a humble bow. Amid the cheers, Celine Hawthorne watched from the rear, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Elara met her gaze for a heartbeat. No anger, no fear, only calm resolve. Celine looked away first, conceding the moment. Later that evening, Elara returned to her studio apartment, the place where her journey had truly begun. The sewing machine rested on its table, bathed in lamplight. She ran her fingertips over the polished wood, recalling the countless nights she had stitched gowns and mended hems to pay rent and keep hope alive. She poured a cup of tea and settled into her favorite chair. Julian's letter unfolded on the side table. In it, he had written of gratitude, of awe at her courage, and of his unwavering love. She traced each word with her finger, tears of joy filling her eyes. I never believed I could belong in his world, she thought. Now I know I belong in my own, and with him at my side. She rose and opened her wardrobe, revealing dresses of her own design hung alongside the modest garments she'd worn for so long. Elara pulled one of her creations, a soft floral wrap dress, and held it to her chest. Each seam carried a memory. The first night she'd sewn by candlelight, the day she'd dared to enter the Carrington Gala in a self-made gown. She smiled, marveling at how far she'd come. The mansion at Carrington Estate felt more like home these days than anywhere Elara had known. The staff greeted her with warm smiles. Gardeners tipped their hats as she passed through the rose gardens. Even the footmen offered gentle bows rather than neutral professionalism. Inside, Julian awaited her in the library. He closed his book as she entered, his eyes lighting up. I've reserved our spot for the twins' first ultrasound follow-up, he said, enveloping her in a hug. Elara's heart fluttered. I can't wait to see them again. She rested her hand on her belly, feeling the gentle kicks that had become part of her daily life. Thank you for everything, she whispered. He held her close. Thank you for fighting, for us. They sat side by side on the leather sofa, the fire crackling beside them. Elara let the quiet wash over her, savoring a moment of peace. This is our family, she thought, built from courage, love, and truth. News of the housing project's success, and Elara's role, spread beyond corporate circles. Newspapers ran human interest features. Seamstress turned executive transforms lives, and Carrington's leading lady, a story of resilience. Elara's face appeared in profile, radiant and composed, the humble daughter of modest beginnings who had made good. At a luncheon hosted by a women's entrepreneurship organization, Elara delivered a keynote speech. She stood at the podium, tall and confident, wearing a tailored suit of her own design. Journalists and fellow entrepreneurs watched as she spoke of adversity and empowerment. I was once dismissed as just a seamstress's daughter, she began, voice clear. But I learned that our past doesn't define us. Our choices do. We have the power to transform not only our own lives, but the lives of others. And when we rise, we must lift others with us. Applause thundered through the hall. Elara stepped, down amid a standing ovation, feeling a deep satisfaction. She had become a beacon for those who doubted themselves. One evening, after the luncheon, Julian led Elara to the estate's private courtyard, lanterns glowing among the wisteria vines. He dropped to one knee, just as he had on the grand ballroom's dance floor months ago. Elara Monroe, he said, voice soft with emotion. "You have shown me the meaning of strength, compassion, and true partnership. You've built homes, built hope, and built a family with me. I can't imagine my life without you." Elara's breath caught. She placed her hand over his. "Julian." He drew out a ring of intertwined bands, each engraved with the twins' initials. "Will you marry me properly this time? Not as a duty, but as an act of love." Tears glistened in Elara's eyes as she nodded. Yes, of course I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they embraced, the lantern light dancing on their happy faces. Around them, the estate's statues and sculptures stood witness to a love that had weathered storms and emerged unbreakable. In the days that followed, Elara and Julian walked the garden paths hand in hand, discussing nursery designs and baby names. Elara sketched ideas for a cozy playroom. Julian arranged visits with pediatricians and decorators. Elara's mother, Miranda, arrived for a weekend stay, her eyes shining with pride as she helped Elara select fabrics for baby blankets. Miranda's gentle presence reminded Elara of where she'd started and how love and family had always been her true inheritance. That evening, in the nursery painted soft lavender and cream, Elara placed 2 tiny booties on a shelf and whispered to the empty room, "I promise to love you, to protect you, to build a world worthy of you." As Elara lay beside Julian that night, the house silent, but for the whisper of breeze through the open windows, she reflected on her journey. She had walked into a world that mocked her, challenged her, and almost broke her. Yet she had stood, firm, guided by the steady thrum of 2 tiny hearts within her and the unwavering love of the man beside her. She was no longer the anxious girl at a glittering gala. She was a woman who had claimed her place, earned respect, and forged a family. She reached for Julian's hand, intertwining their fingers. "Tomorrow, we welcome a new chapter," she said softly. Julian kissed her palm, "And every chapter after that, we'll write together." Elara closed her eyes, a peaceful smile on her lips. The long road behind her had led to this moment, a life transformed by courage, compassion, and the promise of new life. And as she drifted to sleep, she knew her true inheritance wasn't a name or a title, but the family she had fought so fiercely to protect and nurture. Elara stood at the threshold of the nursery, dawn's gentle light filtering through lace curtains. The soft lavender walls, adorned with hand-painted stars and 2 cradles swaying side by side, felt like a promise fulfilled. She placed a single, tiny shoe on the shelf, one for each of her daughters, and inhaled the calm sweetness of new beginnings. Behind her, Julian joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, her heart full. No longer did she see herself as the timid seamstress's daughter who once trembled beneath crystal chandeliers. Instead, she recognized a woman of conviction, one who had transformed judgment into opportunity, fear into strength, and silence into an unshakable voice. The world outside the estate's gates had shifted. Headlines spoke not of scandal, but of Elara Monroe's compassionate leadership and of Carrington Enterprises' thriving legacy of social impact. Yet the greatest legacy lived here, in the gentle breaths of 2 newborn lives she had fought so fiercely to protect. With Julian's hand over hers, Elara whispered into the quiet morning, "We've come home." And in that single, perfect moment, she understood that her true inheritance was not a name or fortune, but the love, courage, and peace she had earned, and the family she had created.